As someone who makes a living managing and treating infectious diseases, what would your advice to National Cabinet be? What's the first thing they should be changing to try and get the rollout back on track?
Well, I think the first thing they need to do is to restore confidence in AstraZeneca. This is still a very good vaccine. It's been proven highly effective to keep people out of hospital, stop people dying. And the risk, as you just heard previously from Omar, is probably about 3 in a million of getting these thrombotic complications, of which only about 5% of people will die, and probably even less than that. So you've got about a 1 in 6 million chance of dying from having the AstraZeneca vaccine. So we absolutely, and as we talked about a week or two ago, we need this vaccine. If we lose confidence in the vaccine and the vaccine numbers drop off, we're going to have an enormous problem catching up with Pfizer, with all its issues too, with supply, etc.
So, Clay, do you actually think that our authorities here overreacted in pausing the AstraZeneca rollout for under 50s? And what do these decisions tell us about our appetite for risk in this current environment? I mean, most medical interventions carry some level of risk, don't they?
That's right. And COVID, what surprises me is that with COVID, we seem to have lost all sense of proportionality and we just can't assess risk anymore. And we're looking at a zero risk environment, which doesn't exist in any part of life. So, we've got these people espousing zero COVID. We want COVID eliminated. We want no risk with anything. Well, that's just not going to happen. COVID's going to be with us forever in some form or other, and there's no such thing in life as zero risk. So I really was disappointed when ATAGI came out and made that recommendation, because basically that really killed it off for the under 50s. There'll be very few under 50s that will accept it now and will want to have the alternative. And of course, as we're seeing, a lot of over 50s now are getting scared as well. But we've got to put this risk into perspective. So let's just look at a fit woman like you, Ash. Your risk of, you got COVID, of dying would be about 1 in about 80 to 90,000. Me, as a fat 60-year-old hypertensive guy, my risk would be about 1 in 500. But my risk with the vaccine, as we talked about, would be 1 in 6 million. So let's get that into some sort of proportionality. And that's what we seem to have trouble doing at the moment with COVID.
And it's not just a call that we're seeing here in Australia. I mean, right around the world, we're seeing health authorities making these sorts of calls about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Overnight in the US, they paused the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine over similar blood clot fears. Were you surprised by that decision in the US?
Yes, I was surprised, but look, that's about 1 in a million. I think 6 cases and 6.8 million doses, so perhaps a little less frequent than AstraZeneca. But what we do know about these thrombotic cases now is we do a couple of quick and easy blood tests to have a look. You look at your platelet count and a thing called D-dimer, and then you do some scans and find out, and then you treat it. People were dying before because it wasn't being recognised and wasn't being appropriately treated. Now we know how to recognise it. Now we know how to treat it. Mortality should go right down. Yes, it's nasty. Nobody wants to get it. But you shouldn't die from this now with modern medicine. So we shouldn't be so afraid, and we just need to get on board, because otherwise, if we're going to rely just on Pfizer, we're going to take well into next year before we have a significant number of the population immunised, and we're not going to be able to open our international borders anytime soon.
And what happens when we do eventually open those borders, Clay? Do we then expect that COVID becomes endemic? I mean, is that the realistic situation, and we have to manage that? And because the population is vaccinated, that's how we move forward?
That's how we move forward. And I think when we open borders, we do it with lower risk countries first, like we've done with New Zealand. We don't go all out with high risk countries, and we'll need to do it in a staged manner, but we'll try and have as many people immunised as possible. Lots of good studies now looking at paediatric immunisation right down to toddlers as well. So we'll have that data. So we'll be able to start immunising children as well going forward. And then we can open the borders. People can be screened prior to getting onto flights with rapid antigen testing, screened again on arrival, go home to home quarantine for a couple of days, and then have another test. This is the way we could build in risk management to get this up and running, and accept that we'll have some low-level endemic COVID that people aren't dying from, or rarely dying from, like an influenza illness, and it becomes another respiratory illness that we just learn to live with low-level mortality.
So back to the present day, for people looking around and saying, well, there's not much community transmission, I'm going to bide my time in getting the vaccine. How worried should we all be about winter outbreaks that could be on the way?
Exactly. So we might have, Victorian hotel quarantine started again. So we might get an outbreak from there. We might get winter outbreaks, because it does seem to be seasonal. We might get imported cases that escape from other hotel quarantines. So we could get an outbreak at any time. So delaying is not a good idea. And then, of course, it then causes the block at the other end. If everyone's holding out for Pfizer, we may not get adequate Pfizer supplies till the last quarter of the year. So it's going to cause that big blockage right at the end. Whereas I think people should say, let's get confidence in AstraZeneca. If I qualify for that, let's go ahead and have it. Obviously, the earlier you have it, you've got to wait 12 weeks for your booster dose. So that's, again, going to take more time if you're going to delay that towards the end of the year.